Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today we are going to talk about, was Jesus Immanuel? So a lot of you have heard about this. I guess the first question is, who says that Jesus was Emmanuel? It's written in Matthew's Gospel, in the first chapter. Now all this that has happened, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, "Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall give birth to a son. They shall call his name Emmanuel," which is being interpreted, God with us. So this is one of the prophecies that Matthew talks about when it comes to the kind of birth of Jesus Christ. Where does he get it from? So let's look at the context. He actually pulls it out from the book of Isaiah, chapter 7. Couple of points I want to talk about here. Let's just discuss what the context is and what's happening here. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, this King Ahaz, not a very pleasant king. But either way, he says to him, "Ask a sign of the Lord your God, let it be as deep as Sheol or as high as the heavens." But Ahaz said, "I will not ask, I will not put the Lord to the test." And he said, "Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and thou shalt call his name, and shall call his name Emmanuel. He will eat curds and honey when he knows how to refuse the evil and choose good. Before the child knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land before whose two kings you are in dread will be deserted." So, a couple of points I want to talk about. The first point, you notice a big difference. The italics is the prophecy that Matthew quotes. Matthew translates it as says a virgin should be with child, while the actual Hebrew uses young woman. Alma is used, which means young woman, ripe sexually, a maid or a newly married woman, basically a young woman. You've heard of the story about Pharaoh, his daughter, when she goes to bathe herself in the Nile and she sees Moses in a basket. She instructs one of the maids, Alma, to go and fetch a mother to feed the child. Now, she didn't instruct a virgin to do that, but just a young woman, and it's used in many times in the Bible for that as well. Matthew seems to be borrowing his text from the Greek Septuagint, which actually does translate it as virgin, but that's not what the Hebrew in fact says. It should have been young woman. But the bigger concept or bigger issue is, what's the context of all of this? So two of the kings had basically come to attack Jerusalem, and this king Ahaz, who was ruling at that point, was fearful. God basically told the prophet Isaiah and his son to go off and tell Ahaz that God will be with him and God will protect him. And to prove that God is with King Ahaz, God gives this prophecy of a child being born and naming Emmanuel, God with us, God with you, basically. So that's the context. So as you can see, Matthew, as he does quite a few times, pulls it completely out of context and just plucks a prophecy which was fulfilled many, many years ago. He just applies it to Jesus quite randomly. And when I raise this with our Christian friends, I get a lot of responses. Yes, this was a prophecy at that time, but also applies to Jesus. With that, well, this is a prophecy that could also be applied to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because God was with him. It could also be applied to the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Muhammad, because God was with him. You can apply it to anybody if you want to. And by doing these kind of things, by plucking prophecies and kind of bringing them out of context, it makes a whole mockery of the whole concept of prophecy. So no, this was a very explicit prophecy. It was fulfilled at the time of Prophet Isaiah. Let's just leave it at that. And Jesus was not called Emmanuel in any way, shape, or form. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.